I think the key takeaway is that the state's economy has fundamentally changed over the last 10 years. We've gotten smaller as a whole. We have less income, we have less jobs, we have less population than we did 10 years ago. And while that transformation is almost done, it was due to the auto industry restructuring, and we're getting ready to start growing again, we are now at a significantly lower level of employment and income than we were 10 years ago. And as a result of that, we need to rethink some things in the public sector. When the economy shrank, state and local revenues shrank with it, and we now have a disconnect between the level of revenues and the level of expenditures. And we really need to go back in there and either adjust the revenues up, adjust the expenditures down, or some combination of the two. Because even when the economy starts to turn around and recover, the gap is so big that it's going to take a number of years. So we need to plan for the economy that we have right now going forward. Well, one of the challenges we've had in Michigan is that the budget problems are so severe that we have a tendency to deal with them a year at a time. And I think this is real helpful in focusing people on the fact that this is not a 1 year or a 2 year problem, and that even if the economy starts to turn around, the budget problems that we're facing aren't going to self-correct. And we really need to start thinking longer term about some of these issues. We need to start looking 5 and 10 years out and looking at what the revenue trends are going to be and what the expenditure trends are going to be and what we want to invest in as a state and what we can do to bring the state's economy back. And we need to sort of look at these issues holistically, look at them more longer term. And I think it's helpful if you get everybody sort of on the same page about where we are right now, so that then we can start talking about what the solutions are going forward. Well, what we've seen happen for most of the decade was that the share of income that was being spent as a personal income, the share of your income that went to government as a percent of your personal income, was relatively constant. But what happened was state revenues fell and local revenues increased. And so we saw very severe problems at the state level. Now we're sort of in the boat where both state and local revenues are declining as a percent of personal income. So that's created one set of challenges. The second set of challenges is our personal income has fallen. So even if we were constant, we would have seen this decline in revenues just shrinking with the economy. Frankly, it's a value judgment for what people want going forward. If we want to maintain the same level of services that we've had in the past, then we're going to need to spend a higher level of our income on taxes. If we don't want to spend a higher level of our income on taxes, then we're going to have to consume less government services. What we can't do is try to have it both ways. And I think that's sort of what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to maintain the same level of expenditures without raising revenues. And what ends up happening is we end up using one-time measures to kind of plug the budget hole. And I think we need to sort of come to grips with the fact that the world has changed, and so we need to make some permanent changes and either raise taxes or cut spending, but one of the two needs to happen. One of the criticisms that people frequently levy at policymakers and the legislature in particular is that the legislature is reluctant to make what they call tough choices. Nobody wants to make the tough choices. Well, frankly, what's a tough choice when you're a legislator is the choice that gets you unelected. And so we sort of, we're our own worst enemy. We want them to make these choices that we're then going to vote against them for making. So frankly, if the legislature goes and does significant tax increases to balance the budget problem, people are going to vote them out of office. There's not a lot of interest in doing tax increases. If they do significant budget cutting, if they do the kinds of cuts that you're looking at in order to bring the budget back into balance, we're going to vote them out of office. And so they're sort of stuck a little bit. I think the legislature would be a lot more likely to make tough choices if people were sort of calling for those tough choices to be made, rather than sort of voting against them when they make those tough choices. Well, the good news for Michigan, I think, clearly is that after 10 years of a fairly wrenching economic decline, the worst is clearly past us in the private sector. I think that we've looked at 10 years of the auto sector getting dramatically smaller, And if you go back to where we were at this point last year, we were getting ready for both GM and Chrysler to file for bankruptcy, and it was very unclear whether they were going to come out, and if they were going to come out, what they were going to look like as companies. Those bankruptcies went as well as could possibly be expected. Those companies look stable, and we don't need the auto sector to grow dramatically for the state to recover. We just need it to stop shrinking. We just could never overcome the loss of those high-paying jobs. I think the state is poised to begin growing again, and that'll be very welcome after 10 years of economic decline. So the storm is leaving. The problem is that we haven't really adjusted the public sector yet for what happened as a result of that economic storm. So we need to get the public sector size to fit the new economy that we have, and then we can grow forward. But I really do think the next 10 years are going to be a lot more positive. We'll see job growth, which we haven't seen in a long time, and we really are getting ready to turn, and things will be better in the state over the next decade.